This is City Paper Live, Pittsburgh City Paper's weekly talk show, where we bring you behind-the-scenes stories from our weekly and online coverage, featuring City Paper writers, friends, and guests. Welcome to the show.
Good morning. This is Lisa Cunningham, editor at City Paper. With me today is our architecture critic, Charles Rosenblum, and our house-loving designer, Abbie Adams.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we're bringing both of you on together because Charles writes amazing architecture columns for us every month. And I don't know if you know Abbie, but she is our designer and she illustrates for the paper. She illustrates for fun and for sale people's houses.
I do.
Yeah, so she's a big fan.
This is the first time we've met in person, but I'm familiar with a lot of these things non-virtually, or virtually, I guess. There I go, and glad to be here.
Yeah.
So what did you do last night, Charles?
Last night I abandoned my interest in Steeler football. I think is what I did, and I actually did a talk for Pittsburgh History and Landmarks, talking about called it the mathematics of style and taste, but it's really things that are opinion and things that are measurable in architecture and related enterprises. So
You work with them a lot.
I do. I'm very fortunate. I have done some volunteer work for them, but they are very kind to commission me for bits of research here and bits of lecturing there, and so I'm grateful for that opportunity to work with them, and I get a chance to do some things that are really about architectural history, and then some other things that are I'd like to put some crazy ideas about architecture and make a captive audience listen to them. And so it's a perfect opportunity for that.
What do you think a crazy idea about architecture is?
Crazy idea about architecture. My crazy idea about architecture is that it should all be good and interesting.
Crazy.
And that's clearly just, way out there in cloud cuckoo land.
So you're saying Pittsburgh is not?
Well, it's a percentage. That's the theme from yesterday. You can quantify. There's certain things you can quantify, and there are people doing good and interesting work in Pittsburgh architecture, and it's always a challenge. Architecture is hard. It's expensive. It's complex. It's bureaucratic. So it's not easy. But there are some people who are trying hard and having some successes, and then there are some people where you can't tell how hard they're trying because they're not having successes. And it will never all be good, but it's just like I would like to feel as though more people are having good ideas, putting their values, putting their artistic aspirations into architecture and making that happen. I was, it's like the Krauss Commons in Squirrel Hill that I was able to write about a few weeks back.
I saw that the other week.
Yeah, well, and it's I got interested in that because as it happens, the firm is 4080. And I know Jeff Davis, who is one of the principals there, but I didn't even know that was their building, but I'm in that neighborhood, and I was going past, and it's like, oh, this has that curving facade, that nice sort of patchwork oranges. Those look really great at this corner. I wonder who did that, because I can tell that they cared about it. And I talked to Jeff, and a variety of people on his team and on the client's team worked on it. And one of the things he said was, we thought having that facade curve in that way, having it be made out of that material was a good idea, was going to look good. We really went to bat for that, even through the budget negotiations. Other things got cut out, other things were eliminated, but we fought for that because we liked it, we wanted it, we thought it would be a good building. They thought we were crazy. See how I did that? Brought it back around. They thought it was crazy to go for this. Actually, the clients agreed. The clients didn't think it was crazy, but it's like that ended up as a good building because they advocated for it. They had a sympathetic client. They had a good project team. And so somebody walking down the street not knowing anything can say, ooh, that's kind of nice, as opposed to that's kind of terrible. And I have the crazy thought that all buildings should be that way. So.
Yeah, we were going past in the car, and I was like, there's the building that Charles wrote about, and he said it's good. And it made me stop because I think my eye tends to just like glaze over all new construction now because it's just like the big paneling, the color, you know, all of this. But it did make me stop and really notice some of those like more intentional details.
Yeah, you do illustrations of houses. Like, what do you look for and what do you appreciate in the houses? Do you ever, somebody ever say to you, oh, I want you to do an illustration of my house, and you're like, oh my God, that I can't bear it. Or how, like, how does that work for you? What do you see that you like, and how does that process of production and appreciation work?
Hard cash.
Yeah, no, well, so I do, I mean, my love for drawing houses actually started years ago when I was doing a big project where I drew like 8th streets. There was an 8th street in the town that I was living in, Goshen, Indiana. And then I started drawing 8th streets via Google Maps all over the United States. And yeah, then...
Sorry to interrupt, but like that's really cool. What was the outcome of that?
It was my university capstone project.
Okay.
And then from that, right after that, I moved to Pittsburgh and was like, oh my word, Pittsburgh is like a treasure trove. Just this amazing, like, so many different architectural styles and neighborhoods and just like these really wonderful houses.
Here's an example.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, and so I started doing, the part that makes me money is house portraits.
Sure.
So people will commission me with houses, and I've drawn my fair share of like ranch style houses or, you know, but I think, Pittsburgh is just, I love the old, like the decay, the part of it. But then also just like sometimes like the simplicity of even in like Bloomfield, sometimes you just get those like very box style houses, but when they're all lined up right next to each other, sort of the symmetry of that.
Oh yeah, like coming over the bridge, and it's like a quilt or a cubist painting, or it's beautiful.
But yeah, I haven't drawn any like office, but well, actually no, that's not.
So Josh is holding up one of Abbie's Penn Avenue house illustrations.
Not working brilliantly.
I'll tweet it out.
With that one, I tend to draw like individual houses, but then after I lived in
Can I see
Spain
that?
for a year and started drawing like these little clusters of houses because sometimes they're so like smushed together or clustered together, and started noticing those a little bit more.
What is the location of this? That looks familiar.
That's on Penn Avenue, so that blue brick building, the grocery cart. And then these I sort of clustered together from different locations.
Oh, okay. So it's terrific.
That same block.
Yeah, it's it makes me think of the potential of bringing different pieces together. So where are you still doing these, or okay?
Yeah.
In time for the holiday season, or
I have this year. I'm doing I'm only releasing 5 house portraits. But yeah, in the past I've been open and ready for business. This job keeps me busy. So
now that she's a full-time city paper designer, she's
right.
Well.
But no, the more easy way to capture it or document it is through photographs.
Yeah. Okay.
So Charles, one of the things that you mentioned about the cross is like the curved building. So when you're critiquing a building, and I guess when you're looking for a house to illustrate, it's important the environment that the building is in and not just the architecture structure. Is that correct?
Oh, sure.
Because in this piece that you wrote about the Arsenal in Lawrenceville, you were talking about how it didn't fit in with the landscape, correct?
Yeah. It's a challenge because I am disappointed in the architecture, and I'm also sympathetic to the challenges of building architecture these days. And in Lawrenceville in particular, You know, building codes are significant. Real estate practices are significant. You can't, you know, I don't know the specifics of building code off the top of my head, but I know in general, it's like you can't build a little 12-foot wide house anymore. And it's like, oh, you put a bunch of little 12-foot wide houses in a row. Oh my God, they're adorable, and it's characteristic Lawrenceville, and this alleyway is 10 feet wide, and that like density and detail gives the neighborhood a lot of its character, and you can't, you know, budget building code, you know, culture. It's like, are you gonna spend $200,000? I was gonna say, are you gonna spend $250,000 on a 12-foot wide house? And it's like, oh, actually, there's the tiny house movement. That's a whole other thing. But primarily, but those don't come in multi-units, and they don't come as row houses. I'm taking a long time to say, you just can't do it. And so it's not, there are things that are outside of the control of the architect. It's like this is like, oh, I have this hand is this size, and then, well, this hand had to be 1.5 times larger because of the new requirements. It's like, you know, that doesn't happen in other situations, but with architecture, they can't avoid it. But in a building like this, it looks as though, you know, I was talking about like Arsenal Middle School. Like that's a Art Deco modern building, and their practices of, we're going to make this symmetrical, we're going to draw on the classical tradition, we're going to have very small scale details, we're going to have very large scale details. It's going to be composed as a thing. And even though it doesn't match the row houses, it's built with a culture and a sensibility and a design approach that really relates to people in a whole lot of different ways. The designers of that knew that they couldn't match the densely packed little row houses, so they took another approach. And it seems like with this building, it's like, we don't really know, we don't really care. It's got sort of row house elements, but it's like my, you know, elephantine other hand. It's like, oh, it's 2.5 times as big, but it's, you know, it's like, I've got fingers and they're giant. It's
I'm
like,
gonna
oh,
be
that's
walking through Pittsburgh neighborhoods now thinking, oh my God, look at that huge hand.
yeah, and that's what it is. It doesn't expand in scale in a sympathetic way, and it doesn't. And when you pile up bunches and bunches of them, it's like, we don't really have a strategy for making this beautiful. It's not, you know, it's not a palace. It's not an industrial warehouse. It's not a type that we're familiar with. It's just this thing that goes on, and it's got some, you know, gray plastic here and some white plastic there, and cement board panels in orange. And it's just like, it hasn't been, people haven't thought about it. It doesn't seem as though they have thought about it. It seems as though they're like, okay, we got the floor plan, we've got this stuff to cover it in, and the roof doesn't leak, so.
Would you prefer Lawrenceville stay all historic? Like, are you advocate for like keeping the historic structures, or are you okay with a mix of modern?
Well, I think that a mix of modern can be a good thing. The big challenge is this issue that I mentioned, that it's tough to match this, like put in residences that somehow match the scale. I think it's difficult to impossible to do that, and you end up things, it's like, oh, this would be fine if it were, you know, 80% or 75% the size. There's a house on 44th Street that's very modern. I have known the architect who did it, and it's escaping me offhand. There's a very modern house, and it doesn't match the style of the existing houses. I don't love the house, but what I like about it is that it's unapologetically modern, but it steps back a couple of feet. So by being a little bit smaller and a little bit deferential, it's like a piece of modern architecture here or there doesn't ruin the cityscape. It can be its own thing, but it's got, you know, the proportions of it become really important.
Would you say that house maybe is a normal size hand with some fingernail polish and a shiny ring?
Yeah, and maybe it's had, you know, you know what? I was going to continue that great metaphor, and I think I'm going to just.
What do you think about tiny houses? You mentioned that.
Yeah, tiny houses are.
Have you ever seen one that you thought looked attractive?
Well, I mean, I think, let's see, there's there's the tiny house in Friendship, and this is one of these things. Now I'm forgetting the architect's name, but it won an award, and it's this little, because it's tiny, a little box with like kind of blue and white panels. As a modern designed object, it's like, oh, that has some nice, design flourishes that you can appreciate if you're leaning toward that taste. It strikes me as odd. Well, the utilities are expensive. If you have to put in your water and sewer, you can be spending $50,000 just to, connect the house. So it doesn't, it might not make a lot of sense economically. Why don't we build apartment buildings? Why don't we expand the market for smaller housing units? It's hard to make them inexpensive, and it doesn't, like, why not put them together in multi-units and be more economical? And it's like, we had tiny houses in my day, we called them trailers. So it's,
Are there any tiny house communities in the Pittsburgh area? I know of individual ones, but...
Yeah, I don't, I think that's a good question. Are there? No,
offhand,
and there, I know of a couple of the two different projects in particular, but I don't know. And that's one of these things. It's like Pittsburgh has so many abandoned houses. Why don't we rehab those? Why don't we make them into multi-units? Why don't we look for economical ways to do multi-house? Would you draw a tiny house?
I would, yeah. I'm curious, is anybody, or who do you know of that's doing that work? Because Pittsburgh does have all of these, vacancies. Pittsburgh also has a lot of, vacant lots as well. So then how do you, redevelop that in a purposeful and, meaningful way instead of doing more of this?
Yeah, the question is a very good one, and my project is, we will join forces in finding those people. I mean, I talked to, as I say, there are a couple of people that I know of who have done a couple of tiny houses. There might be people doing larger developments of them, but I don't know. I secretly, or not so secretly, it's like, when people work hard and complete a project and it has some viability, I want to kind of, it's like, give it the opportunity, unless it's really stepping out of bounds in some way. I personally think tiny houses are, it's like, that's an answer to a question that people did not really ask. It's like, is there a shortage of housing? Well, there's a shortage of ready housing, but there's lots to fix up. Is it have apartment buildings stopped working? No, they still work. And environs, or architectural guides to cities, or increasingly people are writing I have sort of an old-timey view of architecture sometimes, but I'm really enjoying the people writing about architecture are increasingly about community and individual experience and personal and social history, and I'm really enjoying that expansion of the discipline, even though I spent 4 hours late one night comparing Beaux-Arts brackets with Victorian Gothic brackets. It's like, how do you
Which one's better?
That's a long story. Yeah, no, exactly. It's
So 4 hours and still no conclusion.
Yeah, no, I get I was sure it was the Beaux-Arts when I started, and then by the time I finished, I was no longer certain.
I'm just pretending I know what either of those are.
Yeah, well, but it's
thinking about that without a beard, and then you.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I was bald when I started. Yeah, no, I enjoy stuff like that, but it's it's sort of an inside baseball kind of thing.
Can you tell us a little bit about your background, how this came to be, your interest? Did you grow up playing with Legos?
I did. The short story is, I think I discovered, when I was in college and I realized that computer science was not for me as a major, I took architectural history courses because my my then roommate, he's like, "Oh, you should take some architectural history because that's what all the cool people are doing." That was yeah, exactly. No, you saw through that lie immediately. But it was, I don't know, it was an appealing subject. It resonated with me somehow that buildings are dramatic. They are charged with cultural value. They are charged with drama that is, it's personal to the people who experience it. It is, as I say, charged with value to the people in that culture when the work is rich and meaningful. And, the city paper is a great enterprise because it's like, oh, do you care about food? We've got people talking about food. Do you care about drama? Theater? We've got people talking about that. Do you care about visual art? We've got people talking about that. All these different arts that, resonate with an audience. I find dance very meaningful. It speaks to my just sense of humanity. Architecture is that same way. And it's probably worth mentioning, and not even as like a non-name drop thing, but I took courses with this professor, Vincent Scully, who was like, among architectural historians, he was very well known and very influential. It's not important that people know that name or not. It's important that there was this person teaching architectural history and influencing a generation of people who said, oh, I'm going to care about architecture. Maybe I'll be an architect. Maybe I will be somebody working in real estate who commissions good architecture or writes about architecture or works in city planning to make spaces more humane. So again, it's like I've been an academic for a long time, so I'm happy to give you meandering answers. But it was in college. It was this well-known professor and Vincent Scully. And the thing I sometimes say is like, he was the great pope of architectural history, and I sort of became a parish priest, kind of continuing to, because like rabbis are not so hierarchical, so I can't make that quite analogy. But it resonated with me, and it's this thing that, in a secular way, I believe in with that kind of devotion. And it's like, oh, I don't draw very well. And at the time, I thought that was an impediment to being an architect. I'm more comfortable as a writer and, one way or another, educator. I probably, it's like you can learn to draw better. That is a set of skills that you can acquire. But I'm happy with what I did. I'm happy to, sit back and critique what other people do, or to, the thing that I make jokes about, like criticizing what other people do, but what I enjoy doing is finding these things that are out there and creating, a piece of writing or a dialogue or some kind of experience that causes the substance and pleasurable experience to resonate with a broader audience. And it's like, and you do this same thing through drawing, through design. So you're part of that enterprise. But it started in college. It's something that I believe in very strongly in a secular way, and I'm just eager for people to be like, we have food critics and drama critics. Architecture critics are part of that, part of that culture.
So do you constantly critique your own home? Like, this could be better.
I am I don't have any children, thank goodness. But I'm the cobbler whose children have no shoes. I critique other people's homes. Okay. It's one of those things. It's like, oh, the reality of this. It's like, oh, the furnace and the retaining wall and and I'm driven by economy. So, let's go to somebody else's house and talk about the architecture.
So I'm curious, how did you end up in Pittsburgh, and then where have you lived in Pittsburgh? Where's like your favorite place been to live? Or is there a neighborhood that you wish you could live in?
Yeah, that's a good question. My mother is from Pittsburgh, and my father is from Butler. And he went to Shadyside back in ancient times. I actually grew up in Ohio, which is where my father was in the radio business. After college, I moved back here just because it was a bigger city. It was one that I was familiar with. I moved back and forth a couple of times. I live in Brighton Heights. My grandfather grew up in Woods Run, and he went to Oliver High School, which is close to where I live. So it's not, when I was a kid growing up, but where my grandfather grew up is like now where Route 65 is. So that's largely gone. So I'm sort of back in the old family neighborhood, but not exactly. I've lived in a bunch of places. I lived in Squirrel Hill a long time ago. I lived very briefly on the south side. I lived in Lawrenceville for a while. I moved out of Lawrenceville when did I move out of Lawrenceville? I moved out of Lawrenceville in 2009. So I call myself the Pete Best of Lawrenceville. And I live in Brighton Heights now, as I say. And I don't know, I mean, Lawrenceville is getting a little overboiled with development. It's still a great walking neighborhood. It's still a very interesting historical neighborhood. Squirrel Hill has there are a lot of it's gotten more expensive than it should be, but there are a lot of great early 20th century houses there. I didn't really live on the south side. I sort of house sat there for an extended period of weeks between moves. But actually, I lived in Shadyside very briefly. I don't know. I'd be hard pressed to pick a favorite. I like densely urban neighborhoods that have a bit of a commercial street. Like get a coffee, do some shopping, get a newspaper. That's the printed version. Things like that.
Is there any neighborhood that's up and coming that you see has potential to really shine that people are underappreciating?
That's a good question. Brighton Heights, so my house will become more valuable. No, it's a good question. It's also sort of this question of gentrification, and my views about economic development and the role of, for good and ill, of architecture and economic development is changing over time. So it's things like, Lawrenceville I lived there for a while. I spent a lot of time there, and it's they've almost killed the goose that's laid the golden egg, and that plays out a certain way in Lawrenceville. It's more, I don't know, more expensive than it used to be. The new construction, every once in a while you'll get a nice renovation project of an historic house or historic building, but a lot of the new construction is terrible. A lot of the old-timey stores are moving out, so it's is up and coming really, has that helped Lawrenceville? It's like, oh, I really like Brighton Heights. Stay away. So I don't know. The Hill needs, they need some economic development, but not necessarily the kind that the Penguins are bringing. I mean, that's my overarching.
I can't wait to read your critique on that.
Yeah, well, it's there are a whole variety of things, but big corporate real estate development doesn't seem to me like a good solution. And part of the difficulty is you have a lot of good-intentioned people working very hard to get enfranchisement of community organizations, people who live there, and that work is very, necessary and welcome, and values in the right place. So it's hard to I want to be critical of the big corporate crappy stuff, but not be not harm the work of people who are working for the right constituencies and the right values. And so it makes the sort of up and coming nature of that, multi-headed problem. And they haven't even, that's another thing. It's like, oh, I want to see better designed architecture in the lower hill. It's like, oh, you can ask for that, but what about getting affordable housing, getting jobs? Those are higher priorities than I've spent 4 hours studying brackets and I've decided which ones you guys really need. So it's a complex problem, and I don't know. Is my favorite up and coming neighborhood Allentown, Beachview, maybe?
We just bought a house in Marshall Shadeland.
So you're my neighbor.
Yeah, I
okay.
know. Well, I was just
I'll come over to your house.
I'll come over to yours, and then we can critique each other's
right.
houses.
Draw each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's fixing up her house and it's beautiful.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
terrific. I've in a publicly broadcast thing, I won't ask you what street you're on, but
We can talk about it after.
Right.
But have been very surprised by Brighton Heights and sort of that whole area.
Yeah.
In addition to drawing, Abbie also takes a lot of photographs, and she's photographed some real gems up in that neighborhood. Like there's like surprises.
Yeah, no, there definitely are, and it's the sort of thing where we did not buy with the intention of in 10 years selling the house and making a lot of money, but you do have to kind of wonder like, what will our street look like in the neighborhood as a whole in like 15 years? Because it's not. I don't know. It's an interesting what is that street? So do you know where 65 goes north and then as it California Avenue kind of curves? Is that Manchester? And it sort of just looks like a toothless smile where all of those row houses are just sticking up.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw it, I literally stopped and was like, I need to look at this. Because it is, so there's the physical space for, I don't know. Like, I'm really curious on your thoughts of like what, in an ideal world, what would happen there?
Oh, wow, that's a great, there's, one answer is like, they should do, they should put back row houses of the same size, which is probably almost impossible. And then they should, do something like contemporary that is still proportioned to so that, the existing ones still, it's like they spawn sort of a new generation of things the same size but that look contemporary. That's like my sort of picturesque vision of what would look cool.
Yeah.
But maybe part of the thing is do a community process, and I'm very gratified to see there are places where that's happening a lot more. It's like, do a community process, invite the community groups, have open meetings, and ask people what they need, what would work there, what would be suitable. I think the best one of those has been taking place on the SureSave site in Bloomfield, and I think that one has been really well run, although the mystery buyer is not enfranchised with it. But like that as a process of bring people in, give them sort of exercises to generate ideas, develop those into like, we need apartments, we need a grocery store, we need open space, and just like, don't be prescriptive. It's like, this is me telling myself, it's like, you want row houses? Don't be prescriptive. These processes exist, and do it that way and see what happens, and do what is the Studio for Spatial Practice, the little plug for them. They've run this process, and they are locally one of the best people doing this. I think there are other skilled firms, but it's like, get them or somebody like them involved to just like do one of those SureSave processes and see what goes in the empty space near all those row houses, or those diminishing number of row houses.
So they're doing the part with the community. Are they designing, or are they working? I guess I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, well, no, that's a good question.
Can you
And
explain who they are?
they are a small architecture, urban design, and landscape firm in Lawrenceville. I've known the Jonathan Klein, Christine Brill, and Jen Gallagher are the principals, and I've known them, going way back. But they engage in this process. It's like the best of all worlds. Your question of like, do they design? There's not a direct answer to that exactly, because they start out with people from the neighborhood. They give them certain exercises to do, conjure up some memories, talk about a space, cull those ideas together, and through a series of steps, they develop that into specifics about what kind of functions do we need, how much space would they take up, intermeshed with, what does zoning allow, what makes sense economically. In the SureSafe process, they produced a number of different schemes. So, like 4 or 5 different schemes. This is what it would look like with a bunch of apartments and a corner store. This is what it would look like with a grocery store and some open space and a house or two. And they do a number of alternatives, and they don't necessarily say like, this is it, we're done, but here are ideas to hand off to the person, to the developer's architect who's really going to do it. So they start a design process and they come up with real world suggestions without saying, here are your condos and there's your garage.
Yeah.
So I want to talk some shit now. I'm going to introduce our writer, Amanda Waltz.
Oh, great. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
All right.
You can come
So
and take
Is
this
this gonna be
seat.
me?
So Amanda Waltz is going to join us. She wrote a critique of a Gibsonia mansion that she found online.
Yes.
Hi.
Hello, Charles.
hi, nice to see you in person.
The professional woman has logged on. So nice to meet. Thanks for coming in, by the way.
Oh, sure, my pleasure.
This is awesome. I actually very much enjoy your columns, and I don't really care that much about architecture. So.
Oh, well, thank you for the compliment, and I
You're welcome.
enjoyed your piece, and it's like you have insight and acuity with architecture, so I'm...
Wow, I do not.
Okay, well...
What would you say to me?
So describe the mansion that you saw.
Okay, so describe it. Wow.
It's for sale.
According to the real estate page, there's no words to describe it because it's just too luxurious. So basically, it is technically 2 properties. It is a manor house and it is a quote-unquote castle that he designed specifically for himself and his family. The owner is T.J. Levinsky, I believe. I don't know why I'm saying that. I wrote it, and I know what his name is.
I write so I can forget immediately. I know the feeling.
No. But yeah, it's interesting because it seems to take a lot from a lot of different eras and styles of architecture.
All right, she's talking really intellectually, but this is the headline. Can we please talk
doesn't
about this
want-
ridiculous sprawling mansion in Gibsonia?
Yes. It's a little ridiculous. And here's the thing. I'm giving it a lot of credit. I'm talking about like the exterior. Inside there are many, many things that are very curious about this property. There is a replica of the study from the 1960s Batman TV show. There is so I've seen this mentioned in a couple articles. Apparently, it was also inspired by the Collinwood mansion from the show Dark Shadows. Do you remember Dark Shadows? Are you a fan, Charles?
Now I am. I don't know the show, but
It's a vampire soap opera.
like all the good ones are.
Yeah, and I mean, don't get me wrong. I love me a vampire soap opera. I personally would not design my house after that. Because it just seems a little impractical, but...
You got to match your lifestyle, right?
I mean, look, if you want to design a house to be as big and just ridiculous, if you want a big, ridiculous house, by all means, build a big, ridiculous house. I mean, I would not, because I live in a house that has 2 bedrooms max, because just my husband and I. But I think what's so strange about this is it's for sale. And it's for sale for $3.5 million. It's on 6.8 acres, which is a sizable plot of land. I just don't know. This is a house that's so specifically designed to someone's taste that I don't know who would want to invest in it, because it's like, you're going to have to, I mean, would it be fair to say that you would have to make a lot of changes to it?
Well, I appreciate that observation because it's like, 2,200 square foot house with, 2 bedrooms and 1.5 baths. It's like, a lot of people could see their way clear to that. But it's like, I see we have the Batman study and the, Vampire Weekend house. And it's like, the Herman Munster library,
See,
and
that sounds pretty awesome.
I mean, to be fair, so just to give you some, and you said you read it, but I mean, the manor house is over almost 13,000 square feet. The castle is well over 10,000 square feet.
So these are like university buildings to live in.
This is an enormous undertaking.
Yeah,
as far as I can see. I mean, I think there's something like 20 bedrooms, 6 full baths, 4 half baths, something like that.
Can a gaudy house be beautiful?
Well, it's beautiful to the person who bought it, and it's like,
or who built it. I mean,
right,
this is
that's what I meant.
House.
You built it.
This is respectively, I think the buildings were 2011 and 2006 was when they were built.
Yeah, so somebody built the one and said, no, that's not big enough. It's like,
it's a lot.
It's like when my entourage comes, it's like, I have some close friends whose company I really enjoy, but like, do I even know it? My family, my friends, like how, I don't think I could fill this house up with wanted guests.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, the person who owns this, they have children, a wife, family, great. This is obviously, you could probably make a lot of great memories in this property. To me, though, as soon as I see this, my uber practical brain goes, how much is this going to cost to maintain? How much is this going to cost? Not even in terms of like heating and cooling and water and all that stuff, but just like even landscaping. I mean, you would definitely have to hire a cleaning crew to come in. Like, you're not going to clean this house by yourself. I mean, I just immediately think that. And to me, that's another thing where it's like, if you look at this, and it's like, cool, I love this cool house. Batman, awesome. Dark Shadows, huge fan. I'm all in. I mean, then you have to consider, like, what is the real cost of this house?
Right.
Beyond. And why are they selling it, too? That's the other thing, where it's like, you built this house to your specifications. Why are you selling it?
Yeah, I appreciate the sense of, like, the costs are beyond my, it's like, I can't even afford the outfits from those shows, let alone the entire
but can
stage
you
set.
imagine the velvet?
Wait,
So much
let me take a second.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're in the house, Charles.
Okay.
I'm in a beautiful gown.
So am I. Oh my God.
We look so good.
We do. And one of the fascinating things is like the idea of building a house that's much larger than normal people can afford,
right.
And like selecting favorite pieces from things that you appreciate culturally.
Sure, of course.
Like that goes back centuries, and it's like, oh, TV shows, I hadn't really expected that. It's like, I'm definitely gonna add the Brady room, and I mean like, Marcia and
I mean, personally, I would love my living room to look like the Golden Girls.
Sure.
With the wicker furniture.
Right.
Oh my God.
Well, and
the dream.
Right, and clearly this is a family who had the resources to do that.
Right, and if this is what you want to spend your money on, by all means, go to town. I think just for me, obviously something happened where you were like, there's no way I'm going to be able to keep this house because it's out of control, or, I don't know. I'm assuming.
Well, and also, actually, I was going to say, I don't mean to turn into this guy, but I think I just did.
Do it. Turn into that guy,
so
Charles.
How many square feet is this?
Combined,
let's do
some math.
Yes,
Let's do some
exactly.
Math. So it is exactly 12,969 nice square feet.
Okay.
That's the manor.
Okay.
The castle is 10,278 square feet. This is on the real estate. This is Berkshire
Okay,
Hathaway.
so that's like 23,247. Okay, and it's for sale for 3.5 million.
yes. Although the assessed value, Ryan, do you know when I figured this out, is somewhere around $2 million.
Okay.
So
Well, here's the thing. This house is, I think I'm doing the math right. This house is selling for $150 a square foot. That's like cheap warehouse. I mean, this is nowhere near the cost of construction. I
So
mean, this has got to be like,
maybe Amazon should buy it.
yeah, right. So, oh my God, that would be.
is this their new distribution center? They're
Yeah.
super.
So they're losing a bunch of money. I mean, yeah.
Oh
because-
no, the cost of construction, I can't even fathom.
Right. Well, yeah. No. Well, and I agree with you. It's like it's on one hand, yeah, it's astronomical. On the
Right.
other hand, it's like you could bring in an architect or a contractor, and they could take a look at it and say, and I can do this a little bit very generally, but it's like,
Right.
oh, this has got to be like $1,000, $1,500 a square foot. Like it's much higher than.
Well-
so somebody's losing a lot of money.
So I mean, are you thinking just in terms of the building materials? The building materials probably aren't the most expensive building materials. I mean,
No,
you would
but-
assume.
No, but it's it's a custom design,
Okay.
and it's still it's like when we started the hour talking about crappy condos that we all see all over the place, and
yeah.
it's like to build generic non-custom garbage is some hundreds of dollars per square foot. And
Okay.
an architect and a contractor can say, oh, you know what, to do, like, that's got that kind of skin, and it's got those kinds of windows. That's
Right.
$250 a square foot. Somebody in the business will tell you very specifically. And when you've got custom windows and you've got, oh, this is Tudor here and Loire Valley Renaissance. It's like,
Oh,
I've been waiting
yeah.
weeks to say Loire Valley Renaissance. Thank you for this opportunity.
You're welcome. I've been waiting to hear it.
Yeah, but and it's like, okay, that that makes it more costly,
Right.
and again, it's like those Bruce Wayne library suites don't just design themselves.
No, well, that's the other thing too is, because it makes me think like this is on such a small scale, but I just replaced my sink, my garbage disposal went on the fritz. And so we, of course, had a plumber come over, and my husband and I were texting back and forth, and he told me the amount of money to, replace the entire garbage disposal.
Did you weep softly for a few minutes, or how did that go?
No, I said, get it out. And
Oh, okay.
my husband was like, oh, I don't know if we can do that. And our plumber's Australian. He's actually pretty well known in the area.
So everything sounds better when
He's amazing.
Right.
He's
Does
really
the
lovely.
water spit in the opposite direction?
I wish. Can he do that?
I
Yeah.
should ask him
He's
that.
a good one.
Oh yeah. Oh, he's a great plumber. But my husband told me, he said to the plumber, how much will it cost just to take it out? And it was much less. And then he said, I don't understand why these are in homes. I live in Australia. We don't have these, and they're a pain, and they break all the time, and you always have to maintain them. So to me, that's kind of how I look at this house, where it's like, if something goes wrong, it's such a huge house that you're just going to kind of ignore it. Like, if there's something, like, in one of the basements or one of the bedrooms or one of the bathrooms, it's like, well, whatever. We have 10 or 12 other of these in this house.
Yeah, I don't really need to worry about that, the broken disposal in the sitcom wing, because in
Oh
daily
my
drama,
God.
everything is still working.
Oh, yeah. With daily drama.
So
And
this
the CW wing.
Yeah,
this
exactly.
house makes me wonder, are there any guilty pleasures you have that you know are terrible architecture or design, but you just personally love?
Ooh.
I live a life of good taste, so no.
Oh, no.
I
But you watch the Steelers, you said.
Yeah, that's up until
Ooh, shots
yesterday.
fired.
You're a
Yeah.
complex man.
Yeah, no, I'm really shallow. But
I will say I love a vaulted ceiling.
okay.
No, that's my thing. I love a guilty pleasure though. I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know if I have like guilty pleasures of like, oh, I really, I really love a good split level or something like that, or oh my God, I really love vinyl siding, and don't tell anybody. It's more. I don't have the pleasure. I have all the guilt, but none of the
I
pleasure.
love picturing you smoking a pipe with wood paneled walls.
Ooh, my mom loves wood paneling.
I
My
can
mom
picture
goes
it.
to bat for wood paneling. No joke. I don't know. I think there is here's the thing. I think that there's a romantic quality to. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of nostalgia attached to this particular house. And I do think that can be said for even like if you're going to talk about like millennial style. Millennial style is so dictated by nostalgia, but it's a nostalgia that's driven by, you know, what you saw in your grandma's house in the suburbs and, you know, and like the cul-de-sac. And so a lot of it is like technically cheap. And so I don't know. I feel like I can't really judge because it's like a lot of like what my generation does is like, oh, we love our, you know, our goofy mid-century velvet modern furniture, and we love our like, what are those wall hangings that are like knitted? Sometimes there's like an owl. Macrame. We like our macrame, and we like our macrame plant holders because it's like there's something very familiar and very warm about it. So I don't know, but at the same time, the person who built this house is only 47 years old, and I'm like, there's no way that you experienced dark shadows around the time that it was on the air.
Yeah, I was really surprised to find out he was only 47.
He's younger than my sister, and that's like, I mean, that's just crazy to me.
And we know how. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, he's the same age as my sister. Never mind. Oh, sorry, Sammy. She won't be listening to this. But yeah, but I know when my sister was born, and she was not born around the time when like the height of Batman and Dark Shadows would have been around. So it's almost like ag nostalgia. It's almost kind of like you're nostalgic for something that you never experienced like in the moment.
Sure. Well, but like both kinds of nostalgia can be, you know, it's like there's the kind that's like, oh, I experienced this personally, and it reminds me of my grandma, and so I feel warm and cuddly. But I'm about to make a reference that makes me look really old. I'm going to do it. I'm going to dive right in. Around the time of the bicentennial of the United States, that would be 1976.
Are you still in velvet gowns?
Do you remember, Lisa? Do you remember the bicentennial?
Shut up.
I'm right out there admitting it. But there are fads for, for colonial stuff. Sure. And it's like a increase in, it's like, colonial revival has always been popular, but there's sort of a flurry of that. And it's like, I want to associate myself with this. I mean, I'm saying something really obvious. Welcome to my life.
Sure, yeah.
But like, a flurry of interest in colonial times, or a flurry of interest in, I don't know, it's like there's a movie in the, set in Victorian times. That there was a Edith Wharton novel that was brought to screen.
So many.
Daniel Day-Lewis. This is the trivia portion of our today's show. But just
God, I'm blanking.
Just it'll come to me when I'm driving home.
Sure.
But just the idea, it's like, here's this thing set in Victorian times that people really like a lot, so they start decorating that way, and
sure.
So and it keeps the wheel of real estate turning round and round.
Well, I mean, when I went to Germany in the 2006, and there was a big, there was sort of like East Berlin craze, like back when the wall was up, where everybody wanted, the younger generation who like either didn't remember or never experienced living in that time, was sort of like, ooh, let's bring back, let's have like hotel rooms that look like an East Berlin apartment.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Let's have like the cheap soap and the cheap jeans that like that our parents talk about. It is like, it's strange because it's kind of like,
like
I don't know,
single dangling light bulb chic kind of.
Yeah, just stuff like that where it's so curious to me. And then seeing something like this, it's like there's a reason why these kinds of homes don't really exist in the U.S. Like, well, I mean, they do, obviously, but not in the sense that, like, this is very much like a gentry, like a British gentry, you are a landowner and you have tenants and you go out and you have your wellies on and you're walking around.
Amanda, you want to live in this house, I can tell.
I absolutely do not want to live in this house because my
see
Pennsylvania Dutch practicality is like, absolutely not.
Maybe stay in it for a night.
I think this is just it would give me like what's the phobia where you're like
You would talk in your fake British accent and walk around. And
Oh,
love it.
100%. Yeah, if I got to do, that's the thing I say in my article, like if I got to do cosplay in this house, I will, oh my God, the nerd part of me is going crazy now. I would do like a murder mystery RP, like a role-playing game in this house. Like, yeah, I want to do like the fur, I want to have like a little dog on my arm. And
Come for a murder mystery.
it's like, oh,
Who knows that?
I'm Mrs. Entwistle. Oh, yeah, I would definitely do that in here. Okay, never mind. I love this house now.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing. It's like real estate is just cosplay for people who don't want to admit it. It's like it's like, oh, I live in a Tudor mansion. It's like, oh, I live in a California bungalow. You know, it's just like you're not those things. You just bought your way in with more money than I have. So
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of that in Pittsburgh. I mean, we have a real weird variety of architecture, just in terms of like
to go with our people.
to go. Yeah, for sure.
So, falling water, beautiful or overblown?
Why do those have to be two different things?
Oh, yeah.
I love falling water.
Yeah, well, and falling water like places me perfectly in my own relationship to architecture because years ago in ancient history, I was a tour guide there for a while, which was great fun and a way to really experience the house and get to know it.
Did it make you appreciate it more, or did you end up liking it less?
I appreciated it more. I don't have a yearning desire to live there. I like how it lives in my head as a complex, kind of structure and set of spaces.
But again, that house, much like this house, was designed for a very specific person and family.
Right,
to
yeah.
their specifications. And, I think that's, you can't see yourself in it because it's like, this isn't your house.
Yeah.
Though I did feel that way when I went to Frank Lloyd Wright's house in Arizona.
Yeah. Taliesin West.
He built a workshop, like an art studio for his
Right.
wife that was open, and I'm like, I could live here.
Oh yeah.
Oh, yeah, that sounds great.
And then you took a nap on that daybed and they kicked you
Oh,
out.
God, yes, I tried.
Yeah.
Ooh, I love a daybed.
Yeah.
I do. I love a daybed.
It's much better than sleeping under the desk.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. No, but falling water is it was very much intended to be a spectacle, and that's a lot of what it is.
Right.
And it was Edgar Kaufman Jr. showing how wealthy and cultured he was, and, and Frank Lloyd Wright showing that he's a better architect than those Bauhaus guys. And it's, it was an ego trip for two short, arrogant, wealthy or wannabe wealthy jerks. That's a really beautiful, that's like a very provocative and amazing house.
I wish I had you written that for us. Damn it.
Well, I've got a pen and paper.
I mean, if you wanna write about the Gibsonian house, feel free.
Well, it's a good piece of good art of any kind, good piece of architecture will support a lot of dialogue and conversation. I like your writing about it. That it's like, this is outlandish. This is like, can you believe? It's like I like your treatment of it.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think in it too. Just reading some of the responses, there are actually people who. I mean, there are people who obviously are just like, ha ha ha, look at this house. But I have seen just on some of the other forums, people discussing the actual architecture of the house in terms of like the roofing. I saw one person talking about like the basement and how there was mold in the basement. I mean, like, people are really looking at it and dissecting it, which I am fascinated by. And just, I don't think the person who sold the house was expecting this. So, it's just, I think people are just really fascinated. And there's something like the inner life of this property that like you would never get to see otherwise. And going in and just being like, well, what's this and why is this here and why would they do this? I don't know. There's just something very like, it's just very interesting the way people approach it.
Yeah, I appreciate that about expensive houses, because there's like, oh my God, this is $3.5 million, and which is seems like a markdown price. On one hand, I could never afford that. On the other hand, look at those appliances. It's like, oh, I don't want the washer here. Oh, those curtains, no, those will have to go. And you know what? This room gets no sun. I'm not going to use this room. And like all the stuff, like I don't want to park there. The garage needs to be on the other side. This is how these people live.
Forget watching HGTV. You should host it.
Yeah, well, it's.
I would watch a home show with you, for sure.
QED needs to call you.
They my number is.
Yeah, but no, I guess like with something like this, just to kind of maybe wrap this up. I guess with McMansions, whatever you want to call these, I mean, is this maybe a product too of these kinds of homes going out of favor and people just realizing, okay, this is way too expensive and way too hard to maintain, and because I mean there has been articles about like, oh, millennials are killing McMansions because their parents buy these homes, and then it's like, well, we don't want this. It's too much, and we also are.
What do we do with them?
Yeah, what do we do with them? We also don't have the money to take care of them. I mean, I think that's how I approach it anyway. Yeah,
I think that demographically, there seems like there's some decline because the practicality of millennials. On the other hand, I think houses like this will go completely out of style when obscene wealth goes completely out of style. So I don't know. Maybe Bernie will get elected.
Never.
Yeah, maybe never.
Well, there's also there's the tiny house movement and the minimal. I mean, there's always been the minimalist movement. I mean, I remember even the '90s. My friends who were wealthy, their fathers were like, oh yes, I'm practicing minimalism right now, and I'm just like, whatever. You live in an apartment that costs way too much.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think maybe there is a backlash against this to some degree. I don't know if you can speak to that.
Yeah.
More.
I think there definitely is some, but it's like there, a lot of economically minded people, a generation of different values. I definitely agree on those things, but I do think, that the wealthy will all, don't worry, there will always be people with too much money and really bad taste. They might decline in numbers, but they're, there's like a constant supply, and it's in this age of multimedia, there's like we only need a few for that spectacle.
Sure.
So I enjoy both aspects of it. It's like, oh, maybe there will be more modest housing accommodations for practical people without too much money, who will then turn on the TV or the internet and laugh at sprawling vulgarity.
Oh, yeah.
So that's like the perfect balance, I think.
I mean, it's like the royal family. There's a part of us that, well, I mean, not a part. It's a total obsession. Well, we like seeing these sort of figureheads living this insane life.
Yeah, and I don't. It's like in the royal family taking on an American TV star. I think that's really indicates the convergence of these things. It's like, oh, sure, we need millennia of inbreeding of aristocrats, but we also need a good reality TV show. So those things combined.
Oh boy. Yeah, that was great.
I mean, come on, those ears, really, on Prince Charles? Yeah.
Hey, look, it's an open secret. All right. Well, Lisa, what do you think?
What do you have coming up, Charles? Any more lectures?
I don't have anything on the agenda, but I will certainly let you know as they come up. It's funny. I did a lecture yesterday as I mentioned, for Pittsburgh History and Landmarks, which I
awesome.
enjoyed doing. And appreciate that opportunity. I could really do a lecture any time, as I think I've demonstrated effectively, but no calendar events to announce.
Awesome.
Have any idea what you're writing about for us next?
I might be writing about Doug Cooper, the muralist, and the good news is and the bad news is, the good news is that I like his work very much. on his own and in collaboration with architect quilt maker Stephanie Daines. The bad news is that I like their work very much, so it
Okay.
won't be
It won't be a takedown.
no. I mean, there are other things on the. There's a lot of bad architecture to go around, and
Yes.
and more seriously, like opportunities to say, hey, literally, you people go back to the drawing. Like, we're talking about all this architecture media. It's like, good Lord, look at some design magazines before you draw your next building. Is that so tough?
I will say we get a lot of fan mail for Charles. Readers really love him. So.
Well, it keeps
It's
my
fantastic.
mom busy writing
Yeah,
those
yeah,
letters.
yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, Mom.
All right, that about wraps it up for us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Oh, thank you for having
Thank
me.
you, Charles.
And look for the next column in a couple weeks in City Paper. Look for Abbie's drawings on her Instagram. We'll tweet that out. And thanks, Amanda, for coming in.
You're welcome.
Tune in next week. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, everybody.